Why am I here and does it matter? God has crowned us frail creatures with glory and honor. But the crown was given, not earned, and the path to it runs through the valley. It's exhausting to author our own worth, to keep trying harder instead of receiving. The glory we were made for is not the glory of the self-made man.
Thanks for joining us on Life Journeys, a podcast about thriving through the worst pain that life brings. With global initiatives threatening big changes to our way of life, we're going to need to activate Jesus' words about mountain-moving faith. Words That Work is the ongoing series on Life Journeys that is rooted in releasing revelational words of faith that will work every time and with everyone. It's about moving the mountains that keep us from the presence and goodness of God. It's about defining our life purpose and identity through encountering Him until we have the power to move the obstacles that are destroying our liberty and hope.
There is a question that has no business being asked, and yet the psalmist cannot help himself. He stands beneath the open sky, tracing the arc of the moon, watching stars take up their ancient positions, and the immensity of it undoes him, not with despair, but with wonder. The night sky is not a ceiling. It is an abyss, bottomless and blazing, and the man who stares into it long enough begins to feel his own smallness. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? It is the most honest question in all of Scripture, and it arrives precisely where it should. Suspended between the heavens and the earth, between God's grandeur and our dust. The psalmist is not lamenting. He is marveling. And in the architecture of his psalm, the positioning of that question is itself the beginning of an answer. We are, it seems, the center of something, even if we are not the summit of it. Modern astronomy tells us the Earth is a pale blue dot, a mote of debris circling a star in one of 2 trillion galaxies. Science has given us the measurements, and they are humbling. The psalmist had no telescope, but he understood the proportions. The moon and stars belong to the work of God's fingers. Not his hands, mind you, but his fingers. The cosmos is, apparently, what God makes when he is being casual. Into this theater, God has placed a creature that walks upright, composes symphonies, falls in love, grieves its dead, and wonders why. A creature that asks questions. That perhaps is the most remarkable thing about human beings. Not that we build cities or split atoms, but that we stand in the dark and demand to know what we are. The animal does not do this. Only man lifts his face to the void and says, "Why am I here? And does it matter?" And the astonishing answer of Psalm 8 is, yes, enormously, eternally. The psalmist reveals something that ought to stop us cold. God has crowned us, these frail creatures, with glory and honor. He has made us a little lower than the angels and given us dominion over the works of his hands. The whole created order, from the great whales of the sea to the beasts of the field, has been placed, in some profound sense, beneath our feet. This is not a license for arrogance. It is an announcement of identity. But here is the critical thing the psalmist will not let us miss. This glory is derivative, not original. It is borrowed light, not its own sun. The same Hebrew word, ma, that frames the question, what is man, also frames the exclamation at the psalm's opening and close. How majestic is your name! Our glory exists within brackets of his glory. We are crowned, yes, but the crown was given. We have dominion, yes, but it was granted. We are the center of the story, but we are not the author. This is not a diminishment. It is actually the source of our freedom. The person who mistakes derived glory for a self-generated glory is like a man holding a candle who begins to believe he is the sun. He will, inevitably, try to illuminate things that are too large for him and burn himself out in the attempt. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to be the author of your own worth. Most of us know it, the relentless audition, the performance of competence and accomplishment, the internal scorekeeping that never quite tilts in our favor. We hunger for glory, which is right and proper, because we were made for it. But we have been trying to manufacture it ourselves, which is precisely the wrong approach, like a man trying to produce sunlight with a match. The fall of humanity, as understood through this psalm in the New Testament, was not simply disobedience. It was a defection from the source of glory. To sin, Paul tells the Romans, is to come short of the glory of God. The tragedy is not merely moral, but ontological. We have become something less than what we were made to be, and we feel that loss constantly, even if we cannot name it. Every human striving for status, every hunger for recognition, every quietly desperate need to matter. These are the echoes of an original design crying out to be fulfilled. The solution, however, is not to try harder. It is to stop trying altogether, in the self-generating sense, and to receive. Here the psalm finds its unexpected hero. The author of Hebrews reads Psalm 8 and makes a startling claim. The full vision of the psalm has not yet been realized in history. We do not see all things put under human feet. We see suffering. We see failure. We see the gap between what man was created to be and what man plainly is. But then Hebrews adds, with the simplicity of a thunderclap, what we do see is Jesus. Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, not by celestial default, but by sovereign choice. Jesus, who tasted death for every man, not because he had to, but because he could not look away from the wreckage of what we had become. Jesus, who was made perfect through sufferings, and then crowned with glory and honor. In him, Psalm 8 finally matches. In him, the question, what is man, receives its fullest answer. Man is the creature for whom the Son of God thought it worth dying. Man is the being God intends to bring to glory. The path there, it must be admitted, runs through suffering. Hebrews does not soften this. Psalm 8 is an interlude, a great shining parenthesis inserted into a discourse of weeping. The psalms surrounding it are cries of distress, prayers for deliverance, complaints from the bruised and weary. The glory of Psalm 8 does not abolish this suffering. It reframes it. It says, the path to the crown runs through the valley, because that is the path Jesus walked, and we are following him. One evening, after a week of unusual heaviness, of praying without the felt warmth of an answer, of carrying a burden for a daughter that seemed too great for any human frame, something shifted. Not dramatically. There was no thunder, no vision, no voice that could be transcribed. But God came into the room. That is the only honest way to say it. For 2 hours, the creator of the galaxies, the one who superintends the turning of nations and knows the unspoken thoughts of 8 billion people, simply sat with a man in his den. He visited, just as the psalm promised he would. What does one do when the Most High comes calling? Apparently, one worships. One brings before him the things most deeply loved and sets them at his feet, as gently as a father might lay a sleeping child. And one finds that the exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of carrying what was never meant to be carried alone, simply lifts, not because the circumstances changed, but because the presence arrived. He who holds all things in his hands can certainly be trusted with the one thing most desperate to be held. What is man? that thou visitest him. The psalmist asks it as a question of wonder. Those who have experienced it ask it as a question of gratitude. The answer in both cases is the same. We are visited because we are loved, and we are loved because he made us for himself. The final movement of this meditation resolves into something practical and urgent. If our glory is derived from God rather than manufactured by ourselves, then the great work of the human life is not achievement, but surrender. Not the surrender of cowardice, but the surrender of faith. It is the willingness to become, as Paul says, fools in the eyes of the world so that God's wisdom might be displayed through us. It is the willingness to be weak so that his power might be made perfect in our weakness. It is the choice, daily renewed, to decrease so that he might increase. God chose, the apostle tells us, the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, the weak things to confound the mighty, the base and despised things, yes, and even the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are. This is not divine peculiarity. It is divine strategy. When the glory breaks through a broken vessel, no one mistakes the light for the clay. The vessel gets no credit. God gets the glory. And that, it turns out, was always the whole point. We were made for glory, but not our own. We were made to bear his image, which is why every attempt to construct a substitute image, through achievement, through dominance, through the exhausting effort of social performance, leaves us emptier than before. The glory we were made for is not the glory of the self-made man. It is the glory of the God-inhabited one. But we all, with open face beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord. This is the path of the human story, as Scripture tells it, not from glory to obscurity, but from glory to glory. Each encounter with the living God, another step in the transformation, another layer of the original image restored. The process is not always comfortable. The seed, Paul reminds us, must die before it can become what it was always meant to be. The grain sown in weakness is raised in power. The body sown in dishonor is raised in glory. We do not see it all yet. We see suffering, limitation, the slow diminishment of earthly strength. But we see Jesus, crowned, ascended, reigning and calling. And because we see him, we know what we are becoming. We know what the question will finally gloriously answer. We are those for whom he came, those in whom he dwells, those with whom he intends to share his throne. What is man? He is the object of an astonishing love and the heir of an unimaginable glory. That is enough. That is everything.
You can unlock the presence of God in your life. There are revelation principles that remove the mountains, keeping us from joy, hope, peace, and purpose when our world gets turned upside down. Look for these words that work with Pastor Hardika as he shares what has helped him when life got hard. And don't forget to check out his book, The Fortress and the Firebrand, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Thanks for listening to Life Journeys.
Why am I here, and does it matter? God has crowned us frail creatures with glory and honor. But the crown was given, not earned, and the path to it runs through the valley. It's exhausting to author our own worth, to keep trying harder instead of receiving. The glory we were made for is not the glory of the self-made man.